So welcome, 7:15, 7:17. Sorry, I'm starting a little bit late. We are welcoming tonight a couple of folks we've already met with the club, but with whom I would like to start having a conversation about the future. I think some of you have heard me talk about this for a while, and it feels like wasn't able to quite get things moving over the last couple of months as I wanted because certain crises have gotten in the way. But I do think, despite all of the very heavy lifting in front of us and important conversations about policies and plans that need to be implemented right away, we also need to look ahead really a year and a half from now. January 1st, 2022, there will be a new mayor, there will be a new city controller, there will be a new borough president of Manhattan. 2/3 of the city council will be new, all of this because of term limits. All of those new leaders in the city will be faced with a brand new landscape, some of which we can only imagine right now. Our choice for all of these things is actually only about a year away. So the Democratic primaries in June of 2021 will be
This is a different meeting.
Will be determinative in a lot of ways for the election later that year in November.
But we still have to practice.
What are you working on now?
Sorry, 1 second. And then finally, when those leaders get to take office in January of 22. So I've invited City Council Member Ben Kallos here. He represents the Upper East Side. I actually don't see him yet on the list. Ben, are you here yet? Okay. He's going to be running for Manhattan Borough President. He's already announced his campaign. As most of these candidates have, fundraising has already begun. And I've also invited Chris Marte here. A lot of you have probably met Chris before. He ran for City Council in the last cycle for District 1, which represents a lot of downtown Manhattan. He's currently our representative to the State Democratic Party. And he's going to be running again for City Council for a seat that, again, term limited. It's going to be an open seat in 2021. So I tell you what, Chris, if you don't mind, since the councilman's not here, do you mind if I start with you?
Sounds good. Do you want to make me a co-host so I can share my screen?
Yep, let me do that right now.
Awesome. Actually, Ben just got on it.
Oh, I just saw Ben come on. Do you mind if I then stick to our agenda?
Sure.
I was late. I do not mind letting the meeting continue as was. I am a big fan of your Mr. Marte, your Honorable Christopher Marte.
Councilmember, we had just finished my slightly long-winded introduction to this whole meeting, and nobody else has gotten a chance to speak yet. So if you don't mind, I'm going to stick with our agenda and move on to you first. So this is Councilmember Ben Kallos from the Upper East Side, running for Manhattan Borough President. And Councilmember, the way I framed this, I know there's a lot to talk about what's right in front of us, but I'm really fascinated right now about trying to imagine what the city looks like on January 1st, 2022, when an entire new city government takes office with challenges we are probably all having a hard time even imagining right now. Even assuming we have passed the health crisis, we're looking at the possibility that, as we read it in the New York Times yesterday, speculation that businesses might not move office spaces back into the city. I assume we will be looking over the next year at middle-class families looking to move out to the suburbs as they once did, looking for some open space and less density. I suspect we're going to be looking at a populace that's fearful of using mass transit for quite a while. And on top of that, a topic that is close to my heart, I suspect we will start seeing people feel like they need to buy cars as the safest way of getting around the city. So what happens to congestion pricing? What happens to our open streets plans? How does that all play out a year and a half from now? And leave what kind of city does that leave us with? And how do you find yourself fitting into that future?
Wow. Okay, that is big. I will be honest, I've been thinking about it around the margins. I hadn't been thinking about it in that way. I will say that this pandemic has really put a microscope on our society, and the things that are good are great. And our first responders, our healthcare workers, neighbors helping out neighbors. We have seniors on my floor, and all the different of us neighbors have said, okay, I'll take care of groceries, I'll take care of trash, I'll take care of, and just the community and the resilience of the city. But everything you just said, the city this morning said that we are down 40% in Manhattan for trash collection. With the neighborhood that has the biggest reduction is Corey Johnson's district, where, as far as anyone can tell, just like 40% of the population at least just up and left, and more than that, because those of us who are still in the city are generating more trash. So it's more than 40% have gone and have homes elsewhere. But what I will say is, I like to think big, and I like to think about structural change. And so when I ran in 2013 and I didn't take real estate money, people called me self-righteous to my face. I don't know what they called me behind my back. And the thing I wanted to do, the reason I ran for office, is I wanted to rezone to protect my neighborhood from super talls that were marching across Billionaires Row, knocking down rent-regulated homes and affordable housing so that billionaires could park money in the sky. And I was able to actually do that. Not only was I able to do it in my district, I was able to do it on the Upper East Side, Upper West Side, most of the city except for Midtown Manhattan and your district. I wasn't able to do your district because I did not have the support of your local member, and the council is incredibly parochial. And so, just putting the pandemic aside, I think we have a watershed moment right now. I created a new campaign finance system to incentivize my colleagues to make the right choice. It used to be that you needed to raise half your money from somewhere. You needed to get like $5 million, and that was going to come in $5,000 checks. And now people can run for office on small dollars only. There's money in the out year that folks might need to raise, but it's a different world. And all of a sudden, it is the vogue thing not to take real estate money. So one of two things is going to happen on January 1st, 2022. Either we're going to elect a new wave of people who aren't taking real estate money, haven't been corrupted by the real estate money. It's really weird to me because I've got people who are running who have already taken, I think, $500,000 from real estate. And they're like, no, I'm not going to take real estate money anymore, and I'm not corrupted. But it's one of those things where it's like trust. Once it's gone, it's hard to get it back. So the question is, will we elect a city council and a mayor and a borough president who are willing to stand with communities against real estate developers? Because depending on who we elect, that's going to be a definition. I don't own a car. Most of my colleagues in the city council, most of my colleagues in government own cars. So those folks would like parking spots everywhere. They would like more car culture. They would like to get places faster. I take public transit. I took public transit twice today. I don't have a choice. I need to get places. We were doing mass giveaways. And I will tell you, I've never seen public transit move faster. And so every time we've taken away a parking spot in my district, it has been a bloody fight. It has been painful, but we've done it nonetheless. And now I'm doing these First Fridays. We did an SBS town hall, and people are talking about, why do we need parking on the street? We want our restaurants to still be there. Why can't we turn the parking spots into outdoor cafes? And so folks are reimagining what we can do with our streetscapes. I do agree that I think people may feel like they need to get into cars, but I think we're going to see fewer people commuting into the city. I think we're going to have to take a real look at our commercial corridor and what that looks like in the future. And if it is something where we can turn it into, we have to reimagine our economy. And we have to reimagine it towards jobs that can be done here in person and what the essential work is. And in terms of the vehicles, if I get into a place where I can think about more than just my district, if anyone here has a Tesla, that is a self-driving car. And forget about like people needing to be in vehicles and folks are fighting over TLC versus Uber. And I said this 10 years ago, but I'll say it again now. I think we are 5 to 10 years away from a future where folks are not driving in the city, because the only way to get around the city is in self-driving via type car share situations. But I think ultimately we're seeing the public transit closing at night, first time in history. We're doing a lot of cleaning. I've been doing work with Cornell University of my district to actually use science and scientific method to test what's going on and what the index is and how long the bacteria and other organisms can live on the subway. So I think we will have to do a lot of work to reintroduce people to the subway, but I will say there's a certain privilege in that. There are those of us who have the privilege not to use the subways, but then in our Black and brown communities throughout our city, who are predominantly our essential workers, those folks have been on the subway day in, day out, no matter what. And it's a shame that we've reduced service for them. So I think it's investing in our transportation. I'm a software developer by background, in addition to being an attorney. I think it's one of the reasons some of us get along more than others. And I want to know what we can use in terms of our smart cities to inform a better government decision-making. Are there any reporters on this call? And is this like a closed conversation, or is this going to be public? Because there's some projects I'm working on that are not public information.
I can't be sure who's on the call. I'm sorry. It was advertised on Twitter.
Okay, no worries. So we're working on a lot of smart cities initiatives. We've got a number of pilots going. And I think that if I had my druthers January 1st, 2022, if you asked a kid, how many people does it take to change a light bulb? The answer would be, what do you mean? The light bulbs change themselves. And that is technology that I'm trying to work on. I think the other piece of it for me is the borough president has a lot of power over planning. And so I know that folks on this call are going to talk a little bit about a plan for the future of this neighborhood, of Grand Street and the surrounding area. And I know how important Gail Brewer is to my rezonings. And I think this community will need somebody who's willing to stand up to real estate developers and rezone, because I believe infrastructure can change human behavior. The way in which you do your roads can change how fast people drive, how they're used, more bike lanes, things like that. By the way, in my district, I think we've tripled the bike lanes, and I'd like to see bike infrastructure and complete streets everywhere. And so Gail Brewer did mom and pop zoning in her district, which narrowed the street storefronts, which changed the competition so that mom and pop stores weren't competing against banks. In my district, TD Bank has started doing micro branches, which is not great. But listen, government regulates, business adapts. But the goal is, can we do that? Can we change the size and scope of buildings so that they're more likely to build housing that everyday New Yorkers can build with height regulation, and saying if you want to build over 10 stories, over 20 stories, that's great, but you have to build affordable housing on site or schools on site. And in my district, we've been able to do that. We're going to need more schools. I'm going to be honest. And the reason is because if we're going to bring kids back to school, we need to be in a place where if we're in a pandemic, kids can be in there safely. We're going to need to reduce the student to teacher ratio and just make that safe. So I think there's that. For the community boards, I've introduced a lot of reforms, and my hope is that we can work with folks for a knowledge transfer. And I know I'm not popular because of this, but I did propose, and it did pass with an overwhelming support in addition to campaign finance, that in 2029, there will be community board term limits. It won't be, well, I may be borough president, but there will be term limits 8 years after whoever the borough president is becomes. And so that person is going to be responsible for a lot of knowledge transfer. On community board 8, I've introduced objective metrics. If you've missed more than a quarter of your meetings, I'm not interested in reappointing you. And that has generated about 20% turnover for new voices. Now, when I say new voices, people are like, oh, Ben's young, he must put young people on. Now, I will admit that I always put a high school student on because Gail Brewer and I worked to create a high school student position. We changed the city's law so that that could happen. When Scott Stringer served on the community board at 16, it was actually illegal, but that's fine. It's a good predecessor. It's one of my 16-year-olds might be the next controller or even mayor. And so that being said, a lot of the new voices have been all ages. So I just appointed a 70-year-old to CV6. His name's Charles Fernandez. He actually refused a multi-million-dollar buyout to help us stop a developer from tearing down his home. He still has his rent-regulated affordable housing, and the developer wasn't able to expand their base and build taller. So community boards tend to be under-resourced, and I would want to get them all urban planners so that they could actually have a fair fight. And I have legislation on point on that. In my district, we've been very focused on climate change. I actually wrote a resolution that declared a climate emergency. And I think your district, and I know your leadership, and I know it was very controversial about what's going to be happening in that park, but you're looking at the one guy in the city who's good at getting capital projects to stay on track. Because if anyone knows a city project, sometimes they're supposed to go 5 years. I believe that the 2nd Avenue subway started in 2008 when I was chief of staff to Assemblyman Bing, and I cut the ribbon on it in 2017, almost 10 years later. And it was supposed to be a 3-year project. I think you want a borough president who can make sure that as they rebuild your waterfront, that it actually happens in a timely manner. And if you don't have somebody who's a project management type person, many of you will never live to see the end of that construction and the reopening of that park, unless you have somebody who's willing to force them to stay on that 5-year track. In my district, we've done $275 million. In renovations, you're getting $2 billion, and I want to make sure it all gets done. All the work that I've been doing has gotten done while I've been a council member, which is very hard if you know city projects. We've also been building more schools. Instead of taking real estate money, I go to the real estate developer and say, you're putting up a new building, can we put a new school in? And we've been able to build 3 schools with 2 more on the way. And I'm trying to get 3K and childcare and senior services. And I think the last but not least is just, we have a homeless crisis. And we are looking at a city where 1 in 10 of those who are working are unemployed at this point. And we have an eviction moratorium that extends to August 20th. But I don't care how many lawyers you have, if you don't have the money to pay your rent, you don't have the money to pay your rent. I proposed with economist Teresa Giroducci that if a bank takes 0 interest loans from the federal government, and then the landlord and If they do that, they have to give mortgage relief to a landlord. And if a landlord takes mortgage relief, they have to give rental relief to their tenants. And if the tenants get rental relief, they have to pass it on down the line. Right now, we just have Reaganomics trickle down. We gave it to the banks, and that'll help the economy. This is actually saying, no, if you take, you have to give. We're going to see evictions like we've never seen before. Our homeless crisis, if we thought it was a crisis now, is going to be out of this world. In my district, knowing that we didn't have support from our administration early on, we created the Eastside Task Force for Homeless Outreach and Services. We work with all the faith leaders, nonprofits, and some of the elected officials. The cost of sitting at a table with me is you have to support building supportive housing in the neighborhood. Because you can either have people who are homeless on your street corner in supportive housing next door or in mixed income housing next door to you. But we can't leave them on the street. They need somewhere to go. We can't just give them a ticket and say, go somewhere else. And so we've been able to build, I think, 2 or 3 supportive housing buildings in my district. We have a building for formerly homeless women and children across the street from where I live in my backyard. And we have children going to PS 527, which is the school my daughter is zoned for. So my daughter will be going to school with these kids. So I want to see a world where we have elected officials, and Gail Brewer is one of them, who will sit at this table with me, risk her job and the ire of the community to help homeless families get homes and get resituated. And we literally work with the administration, person by person, name by name. This panhandler there, in my district, there was a woman who was known for spitting on people. I remember her from 20 years ago when I was in high school, and we were able to get her off the street after 20 years. And so that's the type of attention to detail. And I also want to make sure that we clean up our streets. In my district, we put a new trash can on every single corner in the district. It's new, it's covered, it's infrastructure. And if it's full, you can't get anything in anymore. And when you have the regular trash cans, the rats love it. They get knocked over. And when wind blows, the trash blows out. We don't really have the same litter problem in my district. And this is something we could do for the entire city. And we could do smart things like synchronize alternate side of the street parking with trash pickup so that the trash trucks could go just pick it up and zip it along. And we could put the trash in the rat-proof containers like they do in the suburbs. And I've already spoken to the sanitation union. They're on board. So this wasn't what I was planning to talk about. You asked a hard question, and I'm going to answer it.
I appreciate your taking a divergence from what's probably your normal talking points. Do you mind if I take a couple of other questions here, though?
I want to hear from the members.
Yeah. Hey. So Bill Ferns has a question. I think I've just unmuted you, Bill.
Yeah. Okay. Hi. I met you at a previous Grand Street Dems meeting, and you gave me a very clear explanation of why rezoning can't get through the city council so easy. So I appreciate that. I have 2 questions. They're not actually related. One, you mentioned the term limits for community board members. Is that going to include the managers of the community boards? And then secondly, unrelated, but to your question about affordable housing, one of the things that I've come to realize about the affordable housing programs is that they use the AMI for the New York area, which is something like $104,000 now, as opposed to the median household income for New York City, which is close to $52,000. And I was wondering if there'd be any possibility of modifying that law so that it had a much more realistic metric for New York City families. That's it. Thank you.
Bill, thank you for your thoughtful questions, and thank you for still being nice to me, even though I believe in radical honesty and just saying what's going on so we can all be on the same page. In terms of the affordable housing, so in terms of the affordable housing, this is where your council member matters so much. If it is as of right affordable housing, so 428 type or the new New York State Affordable Housing Program, that's set by your state elected officials and HUD. And so HUD says it's the regional AMI, and they get HUD dollars through HPD and what have you. Now, if they were getting a tax abatement that is discretionary, so in the city it's called Article 11, HPD has other loans, it is your council member who determines what the AMI is. So when I was chair of the land use subcommittee on when the city gives away land for $1 or gives away these tax exemptions, I would say to people, I pulled up the zoning tract and I said, the AMI in the zoning tract is 80%. You're building affordable housing at 100% of the AMI, therefore you are gentrifying the community. And my colleagues were incredibly supportive and enjoyed me doing that. And the developers loved it and they dissolved the committee. And so the piece being, just like you can, the power of the council is if you don't respect them being parochial, they can always, votes is power, as we see in Congress, unfortunately, with this president. And what was the first piece?
The other one was about, you mentioned term limits for community boards. Does that include the community board managers?
It does not include the community board managers. Have you had low turnover or high turnover on your community board managers? In CB8, we've had like 3 managers since I've been a council member.
I used to live in the East Village in the 90s, and I went to Washington Heights, but I think the current manager was the manager even back then, but I'm not sure.
I would say that if you're on a community board and everyone on the community board has been there for as long as the manager, then it is hard to have movement. But if you do have natural churn, as we will start to see, because it will be offset starting in 2029, the manager may be there and may be very important for institutional memory, or with the churn, with people like you being able to get on because there may be vacancies, or if you're already on, you coming off and allowing new folks in, that will create the type of churn that is necessary to make changes in staffing. People are policy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Councilman, I got one more question, and then we're going to switch over. But Tommy Loeb has a question about our East Side Coastal Resiliency Project.
Thanks, Jeremy. I want to also alert you about an impending crisis. As you know, a large segment of the community did not support the current plan. It was controversial. We came up with a better plan after Sandy, and then the city dropped this $1.5 billion plan involving $1.1 billion of city funds. A side question is there a better use of city funds right now than that? But we're really facing a crisis because one of the things we need, the project is supposed to address Sandy type events and climate change. The Sandy type events require interim flood protection, which even the borough president hired an outside independent consultant who recommended interim flood protection. That was 5 months ago. The mayor's office on resiliency was supposed to study it, come back to the community, and give us some thoughts and involve us in trying to prepare. We have over 110,000 people on the Lower East Side now who currently live in a flood zone. And should there be a hurricane in the next 5 or 6 years till the project is completed, we would have to evacuate all 110,000 people to shelters or outside of the area. Now, given the current pandemic, where the park has proven to be even more important than ever, we're faced with a possibility this summer, hurricane season starts in less than 2 weeks, of having to evacuate hundreds of thousands of people to common shelters where we know what would happen, all because we can't get the mayor's office or anybody to pay attention to the fact that we need interim flood protection, which part of the community has gotten in Lower Manhattan, but the area from basically Jackson Street all the way up to past Stuyvesant Town, we have seen nothing. So you're going to either inherit a crisis, or we're going to have a crisis in this summer if we have a hurricane that requires evacuation and we don't have as a minimum interim flood protection. What are you going to do about it?
I think I'm going to listen to you. I think you've laid out a very strong plan. I think what Gail Brewer did in terms of bringing in an outside consultant is literally my playbook. That's what we did for Sutton. That is what we have done for all of the waterfront projects in my district in order to bring in a second opinion, because just again, to be honest, government should work, but I don't think it really does most of the time. And I think that the community's voice isn't often reflected, which is why I use member items from my office, and your next council member can either use the member items from their office to punish enemies and reward friends, or they can use it. And I will give money to a nonprofit called Civitas, and they'll spend $40,000 doing an educational session studying these things. And that way we're able to do a lot more than we normally could have, including a lot of the rezoning work. So I would continue to fund those types of issues to the extent that your local member, because of the parochialness, but as we get closer to 2021, I'm happy to be helpful. Ultimately, it sounds like Gail is being supportive and being a strong champion, has put her money where her mouth is. I'm happy to support Gail and your club in any way I can. And I will be honest, probably too honest. This money has been sitting in the budget since 2014. And since 2014, I've been asking the city, why are you not getting this done? And so now we are 6 years later. We have lived through a lot of different flooding events. And I think one respite, which is I'm going to be honest. If your concern is making sure the park is open, right now is probably a moment of opportunity for you, because we don't know how many projects are going to be stalled, because we're not even sure what our capital budget is going to look like. So when I started, we had a $30 billion capital budget. We now have a $95 billion capital budget. And I believe our credit limit is $90 billion. So we are maxing out our credit card. So the city currently, as part of the budget process, is reevaluating. So that is an opportunity to go back and look at and have conversations. But what I would say is, I would like to get your neighborhood protected. I would like to get those 110,000 people protected as quickly and as permanently as possible, in addition to having interim measures in the meantime. But I just don't want to be in a place where we get a temporary victory of saying, we delayed the spending of the money, but then end up in a situation where June rolls in and where 5 years from now, we get another superstorm and lives are lost. So it's balancing the equities, trying to figure out what can we get done with what we have. And I absolutely agree. And Tommy, my email is bkallos@kallos.nyc. If you can send me more about the interim measures. I remembered one of the plans was to put metal I-beams, steel I-beams over the highway dividers, so that you could slot in pieces of water impermeable surfaces, so that you could add 5 or 10 feet to the thing in the event of a storm that you saw coming. And I don't know if that's what you're referring to or something else. So I want to learn more and be guided by you. And I think one last thing is, I believe in having openness. I do my first Friday every month. I'm going to keep doing it. As far as I know, I'm still the only elected official who does open office hours every month. I know that GSD has been incredibly welcoming to me, and perhaps I've made a nuisance of myself, but I will continue to be a nuisance of myself. I really look up to Gail Brewer. She does 10 events a night. I'd like to do 10 if I can, but I don't think it's possible for anyone to be Gail Brewer. So I'm going to aim for 8 or 9. I promise that you will always have access to me. And as Bill can attest to, I will always be honest with you, and we will work through this together, because there's no choice.
All right, great. Councilmember, thank you very much for joining us. I hope we will see you again, I'm sure, at some point over the next year. There's a lot more of this conversation to have. So thanks. I'm going to now turn over our meeting to Chris Marte. Chris has announced his campaign again for City Council District 1, which encompasses most of the area that Grand Street Dems overlaps with, except for my building, of course. Chris, you had some things you wanted to show us first?
Yeah, I wanted to do this a little differently this time, just to, let's see if I can do this. Can you see my screen?
I can, yeah.
All right,
I get some
awesome.
thumbs
See in
up
the
or-
beginning,
yeah.
maybe a few thumbs up. All right, perfect. Cool. So thank you everyone for being here today. I just put this quick slide together just to talk about some of the issues we were facing before the crisis, some of the issues that we're seeing now during the crisis, especially in our district, and how to start tackling these issues with a vision for our whole district, and specifically where we live in the Lower East Side. So first, I just want to quickly introduce myself. I know Jeremy gave me an introduction, but I did see a few folks come in after he did that. I was born and raised in the Lower East Side. Like Jeremy said, I previously ran for city council, but in 2018, with the help and support of Grand Street Dems, I became the local state committee person of the 65th Assembly District. What I do for work, I work for ARENA, which is an organization that supports progressive candidates, civic leaders throughout the country. In 2018, we helped flip New York State from red to blue. So what's Council District 1? It's the Lower East Side, Chinatown, Soho, NoHo, Little Italy, Tribeca, Battery Park City, Fide, the Seaport, and Greenwich Village. So most of Lower Manhattan. So pre-COVID, even before this crisis, our neighborhood had its fair share of challenges. Overdevelopment, we saw it in the Two Bridges, where mega towers were planned that were going to accelerate gentrification and displacement. Environmental resiliency, like Tommy mentioned, it was a piecemeal approach to protecting our waterfront, which meant we were only going to protect parts of our neighborhood, but not the whole district. Our small businesses, there was a crisis even before COVID. There was high rents, unfair fines that forced many mom and pop shops to close. And these mom and pop shops were the foundation of our community. And there was a whole line item of quality of life issues, whether it's dangerous traffic that threaten our walkability through our neighborhood, overcrowded and underserviced public transportation that many of us used to see when we used to go to work. But our community has been organizing. We've been fighting back on all these issues. And recently, we got a lot of victories and gained momentum. For example, stopping the developments in the Two Bridges neighborhood, trying to lobby the city council to pass progressive small business legislation. But that momentum is on hold because we're facing a new unprecedented crop of issues. The most important one is food access. Many folks in our community, many of our low-income neighbors and homebound seniors have limited access to meals and are unable to go grocery shopping. Financial insecurity. Tenants, small business owners can't pay rent. And the assistance that they're getting from the federal government, state, and city are falling short to their urgent needs. Educational development. Our most at-risk students are facing even more challenges. Kids that didn't have a laptop and just have an iPad now, thanks to the city. Students who have learning disabilities are not getting the education they deserve right now. And budget insecurities, like Ben Kallos mentioned. We don't know what's going to be cut, but we're going to need these programs because this is when we have crises, is when these agencies should be stepping up. However, there's been a lot of hope. I've seen a lot of you out there. Our community has really stepped up, has come together to take care of our neighbors. I've been going door to door almost daily, delivering meals and groceries to homebound seniors and low-income families through some awesome organizations like Vision Urbana, which is just local here on Essex Street. Henry Street Settlement has partnered with them. Rethink is a new organization that stepped up and started serving folks from Grand Street to Chinatown. But there have been other amazing initiatives. A9 Women Campaign was started by two organizations that are on Grand Street, but they decided to start a new initiative where they were going to fundraise to support home attendants that are taking care of our seniors. They fundraise to purchase PPEs, not only to protect the seniors that they're with, but to protect themselves as they come from home, which is usually in the outer boroughs. I partnered up with 2 small businesses in the local community, and we were able to raise $15,000 for them. And hopefully we can do more for them. I've also partnered with some local residents of the co-ops, small business owners, artists, art gallery owners. We started a petition to lobby to say that we need more from our government to support freelancers and small business owners. In that petition specifically, we got 50,000 signatures. There's a lot of other ways to get involved. If you have any questions or want to, feel free to reach out to me. But these are short-term solutions. We need a long-term vision. After 9/11 and after the 2008 financial crisis, the response of our government was to bail out real estate and banks. We need a community-based plan for how we're going to overcome this difficult time. In the city council, the biggest power you have is land use. Community-based rezoning can shape how your community grows, protects what makes them our home, and regulates the powers of special interest. My top priority is not only implementing, but expanding the Chinatown Working Group Plan, which is a community-based rezoning plan that achieves these goals. In addition, we weren't prepared for Sandy. We weren't prepared for COVID, but we can be prepared for whatever comes next. There has to be a robust, community-focused, and adaptable plan for our next natural disaster, because it's not if it's gonna happen, it's when it's gonna happen. I wanna start working on this with everyone so no one is left behind. Probably more now than ever, many of us need it. We understand the role and the value of what public spaces, gardens, and parks are. I'll fight to defend what we have, but we need to advocate for more because we know that these spaces are essential to our health, especially to our seniors and to our kids. Our community has always had difficult issues in the past, right? I mentioned Hurricane Sandy, 9/11, blackouts, but because we've been a community and we've been resilient as one, we need to keep on growing that foundation. And that's why I think we need to support institutions like our libraries, after school program, cultural initiatives. A lot of them run through our nonprofits like Education Alliance, Henry Street Settlement. We need to expand the funding for them and not limit them, because through hard times, they're the ones that have been stepping up. We also got to make sure that we have to bring government to people. We need to have virtual town halls. We need to make sure that our participatory budgeting process is virtual, so everyone is still included in where our money goes. But to make that happen, we need to make sure that everyone has Wi-Fi. What we've realized in the past 2 months is that there's kids, there's seniors that are not connected to their family, not connected to the schools, but to make sure that they're involved in our politics and in our government, we have to give them access to internet. Those were just a few items that I want to touch on. COVID is new for all of us. Even as we create policy and try to figure out how long this is going to last and affect our district and our city, we're evolving like everyone else. My campaign launched just a month ago, and we've been dealing every day with calls, emails, DMs about certain issues that have been arising, and we've been trying to tackle them. So if you go to our website, we'll be refreshing it almost weekly with update information on how to get resources related to COVID. We'll be uploading more policy agendas. But if you want to see what we're doing on the day-to-day, feel free to follow me on social media. We just released our campaign video as well. You can watch it at bit.ly/vote-Marte. I'm happy to take any questions. Jeremy, I'll kick it back to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Chris. Marion, you had a question about zoning. Do you want to chime in now with that?
I think you're on mute.
Yeah. Hi, Chris. It's really nice to see you. And I know some of what you believe because we've run into each other at a lot of movements for zoning. But I'm very interested in zoning, and I'm very afraid that some of the progress that we've made in this pandemic is going to, we're going to have backlash, that things are going to get passed through that shouldn't get passed through because everybody's so worried about how we're going to eat and how we're going to pay the bills and who's going to get unemployment, all of which are critical. And meanwhile, our neighborhood is I mean, you know what, it's just been growing and growing. You know, we were at the planning commission meeting for the Go Broom project on Broom Street, and we watched people ask no questions about going from an R8 to an R9, I hope that's right, and asking for something like 10 other variances so that they could go to every sidewalk, to every, you know, every other thing that was happening. I was at a community board meeting where they were talking about the Chinatown Working Group plan, and now they're only discussing one part of it, which is on the two bridges on the, you know, I'm sorry, I don't know what street it's on exactly. It's South Street. And that's the only thing they're discussing anymore at the community board level. So I'm just wondering, and the other thing that I've observed is that almost all these projects are partnering with nonprofit organizations, and the nonprofit organizations are going to the commission and going to the community board and saying, oh, they're good, see, they're with us and we're going to do these really good things because we're the local nonprofits. For Go Broom, when we had testimony, there was no local people in support of them. There was only nonprofits, some of them local, others not. So what do you think we can do about that as we have all these other very critical issues facing us?
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of issues that we're facing, but I think land use is the most important because it not only shapes what happens in the next few months, but it's going to shape what happens for decades to come.
Right.
And I believe that we shouldn't just rezone one part of our neighborhood because that leaves a lot of people who are vulnerable to overdevelopment and displacement. And I've been committed to not only just trying to rezone what's in the plan, but hopefully expand it. And hopefully I'll be able to work with Grand Street Dems to incorporate them within the Chinatown Working Group plan as well. When it comes to community boards, your city council person gets to a point, at least half or a third, depending what community board you're in. And I'm gonna make sure that I understand people's perspective on real estate and their perspective on the ULURP process and what role they want to have in that process during the interview. And so I don't take, and I know there's a lot of issues we have to tackle, but land use is what can shape what small businesses we have, what type of buildings we have, our street culture. And so I think it's something that we have to tackle as a community and do it immediately because it will have ripple effect.
Thank you.
Judy, you had a question about MTA funding and bikes. Do you want to hop in?
I don't know if it's still there. Is Ben still there? Hi. Can't see his face, but I'll talk to him anyway. Two questions, one's hard and one's a simple yes or no. The first one, without congestion traffic, which would be great, the congestion pricing won't be there to help pay for the MTA. The state is facing, according to Cuomo, a $61 billion deficit. How are we going to continue to get funding for the MTA without drastically raising fares? That's the hard question.
If I had that answer, I'd be running for governor. But what I will say is New York State joined with California and other states that actually have real public transit systems requesting the direct bailout. I am afraid that we're going to continue to see trickle-down bailouts and no money to the states, particularly because of how Trump feels about Cuomo, even if he does use Cuomo in his advertisements that he makes in the White House. But we need more federal money. New York State New York City residents pay more as a portion of the budget than anywhere else. And then, just to be honest, a lot of the changes we've had to make during the pandemic are because we're not being smart. I've been fighting MTA, and I'm willing to provide you with documentation. There is no reason why you need to use a Metro card anymore. Literally, you could get on the bus, you could pay off board, And in Nassau County, it displays a code for that day, and they just look at the code and then you get on. And we could be doing all door boarding. We could be doing RFID. It's in the budget. It's supposed to happen this year, actually. We do have the contactless payment, but the contactless payment is far beyond things. And the reason I'm saying this is because I mentioned that I rode the public transit today twice. I rode a bus, and anyone who's gotten on a bus recently knows that you don't pay a fare to get on the bus because there's a giant circle around the bus driver, and I respect that. But if we had all door boarding and you could pay on your phone, then we could still be collecting revenue on our bus service, which we've given up. So I guess I would want to race as quickly as I could to do so. And in terms of the congestion pricing plan, I support congestion pricing. I did write an op-ed. The congestion pricing plan would only cover 700,000 drivers. There's 4 million vehicles that used to enter the city every day. I want to toll all of those folks from all over Nassau, Suffolk, Westchester, and New Jersey. And we could raise far more revenue and discourage far more drivers than just taking a small piece of the pie. And so I think there's a way to do things more intelligently. But I think just as it was opened up on this call, we're really going to need to reevaluate public transit and our city as a whole moving forward, and just what the future is going to look like.
By the way, when you go after Omni, ask them why seniors who pay half fare can't join the Omni program before 2023. Because I've asked that question so many times, and I've been told that that's the way they're going to do it.
I will.
No idea.
I will share a trick of the trade, and this is just from First Friday and just being pure honesty. You can give it to me. I will send a letter on your behalf. So let's connect after this. It's Kallos@NYC. We worked with the East 72nd Street Neighborhood Association. I said to them, listen, I can advocate, but the MTA is really the decision maker. So they showed up at every MTA meeting, every public session, saying, we want you to add a stop at 72nd Street. And after doing it 3 times in a row, the MTA sent like 20 people and like continue to work with them on adding a bus stop. So if you are interested, I'd like to work with you, Grand Street Dems, and then perhaps Transit Alternatives or some of the other advocacy groups. And when they go back to doing things in person again, I'd like to bring you to the to the MTA meetings each month, every month, until either you give up or they give up.
I don't give up that easily.
And
the second question is a simple yes or no. Some of the deaths of cyclists in the city have been their own fault because they disobeyed the traffic rules. And speaking as a pedestrian, I love to see more bicyclists, but I don't like to see them aiming for me. Where do you stand on license plates for all bikes in this city? Yes or no?
No. But what I want you to know about is if you go to benkallos.com/bike-safety, we have the only and the biggest bike enforcement program in the borough of Manhattan. If you Google Ben Kallos bike enforcement, you will find a lot of negative posts about me on Streets Blog, Fox News, even some other publications, because while I do want to expand bike lanes, I believe that people should follow the law. So it's benkallos.com/bike-safety. And the proof is in the pudding. It is safer to be a pedestrian in my district now than it was when I got elected. It is safer to be a motorist in my district now than when I got elected. Cyclists have actually are flat, but there are actually 200% increase in cycling. So there should be enforcement. They should follow the law. I don't think that a 6-year-old should need to get a license to ride a bike. But I will say, because of all the enforcement we did in my district against bikes and e-bikes, the governor went and legalized e-bikes. So I'll just say, I try to be responsive, but there are other elected officials. And I just want to share one thing about something that Christopher Marte said. He is correct. The borough president, the council members make nominations. I will tell you that Gail Brewer is very responsive to my nomination. And so when I don't want to nominate somebody, she has sometimes picked them up. We have agreed on certain people to take off the community board. It's difficult because she does not like that process, I can tell you that in Queens and other boroughs, council members did not have that power because the borough president just threatened them and said, I'm going to do whatever I want. So one of the questions I ask every community board appointment is how tall is too tall for the Upper East Side? And then I ask a number of follow-up questions. And I think whoever you choose for council is very important because they will determine half of your community board, but you need a borough president who can be their partner.
Good, thank you.
Hey, Chris, did you want to address any of Judy's transportation questions there about bike licensing or congestion pricing?
Yeah, I agree with Ben Kallos. I don't think there should be licenses for riding your bicycle. But I do think there needs to be a lot more safety measures in place. And we got to make sure that cyclists actually respect, the red light or the stop sign. But with that, it takes a lot of infrastructure and a lot of education. We got to make sure that bike lanes are protected where we don't have trucks and bus going onto them, which sometimes take cyclists onto the sidewalk or onto the middle of the street. And so maybe this is a good opportunity with the city changing leadership that we look at how to change our streets.
Thanks. Hey, Keen, did you still have a question you wanted to raise?
No,
No?
I'm okay with it now. I got it. Thanks.
Okay, great, thanks.
They answered.
I've got time for one more if somebody else wants to raise their hand. Otherwise, we're hitting an hour and I don't want to take up anybody's time anymore.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Kim.
Back to bikes for a second. I'm coming from, I completely agree that bicyclists should follow the law, but it's tragic that so many cyclists have been killed. It's unbearable and kind of unbelievable. And it almost seems like it's a free-for-all. And I'd like to know what Chris and Ben, you would do to protect cyclists, not to penalize them more so.
Yeah, I think
Chris, can you take that first?
Chris.
Something we can do immediately is have connected bike lanes. One of the issues now, like you could be on a bike lane going down on Allen Street, but then once you hit, 3rd or 4th Street, you're not on one, and that leaves you extremely vulnerable. I'm a cyclist myself. I love riding my bike, but I know that I can't sometimes ride it within the city limits just because it's too dangerous. So we got to make sure that we have a connected bike lanes. That's something easy to do. It's not going to cost a lot of money. But we have to create a cycling culture. If you look at European cities, if you look at certain cities in our country, there is a culture of how to ride your bike in public around in an urban community. That's going to take a little bit more time, but I think you have to start with leadership. I know our council member up in District 3, Carlina, rides her bike every day to the city hall, and she does it respectfully. And I think it kind of leads by example. And I think that's what we need down here as well.
Before I get into the answer, I do want to say one thing I would like to put on your radar is in my district, we've started to close streets for social distancing. I don't know if we're going to be done with this on June 29th. It doesn't look that way. I don't know if this is going to last 2 years. We've closed east end of my district 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., 83rd to 89th every day. I'm trying to close more locations. One thing that this organization could do is find locations in the district where you can build community support and close some of the streets moving forward. And what that means is cars can still go on the street. They're asked to go 5 miles. They have to go through barricades. They yield to pedestrians. Bikes can go on, but it really creates a space. And what I would say is, and so I'm almost afraid to say it because I don't want to jinx myself, but in my district, since I've been a council member, we have not seen any bike fatalities. And that's because when I got elected, we had one protected bike lane, one crosstown pair. We added 2nd Avenue as a protected bike lane from the top of my district, 96th Street, down to 63rd. Then they did a Sharrow. That wasn't okay. So now we have parking protected bike lanes down to 59th Street. If you've ever biked past 59th Street Bridge or any bridge or tunnel, Those are the most dangerous intersections in my district or anywhere in the city. So we created something called a pork chop. So you can now cross the 59th Street Bridge on a bike. If you're interested in coming up, you can. And something I'll ask Chris Marte at this challenge, every year I bike to City Hall from my district office. And if he is a council member, I hope he will continue that tradition of biking to City Hall. And Kim, if you're interested, I'd love to have you join me. We go from 93rd all the way down. Hopefully, we would have done it this year. We would have done it for Bike to Work Day this year, and that was another casualty of it. So we doubled the crosstown bike lanes on 70th and 71st, 77th, 78th. We added leading pedestrian intervals, and then we put in. I'll also say City Bike has changed the bike culture. It used to be that there were fewer people biking and they were usually going faster. On a city bike, it's big, it's clunky, and it's hard to get fast. So generally they have a traffic calming effect, because even if you want to run a red light, you end up with like 2 city bikers stopped at the red light. And then we do, in my district on the Upper East Side, before the pandemic and during the pandemic, the #1 source of bike traffic is delivery cyclists. And so we do a program in my district. I use your tax dollars. We buy vests, which are very close to having a license plate that I know Judy would like. And it has the name of the restaurant and the number. And what I've actually done in my district is on the Upper East Side, they used to slide menus under the doors. So I do something called Ben in Your Building, and I go to co-ops and I'm like, will you ban the delivery of food without a vest on? Which means your tenants have to be bought in. But the idea is if they don't have the vest on, they can't make the delivery, and then they get banned from the building. And if they're wearing the vest, then you can say, oh, look, Chris and Ben's pizza delivery place almost hit me. They should be banned from the building. Or they're riding an e-bike, but the e-bikes will now be legal. But so we've done a lot of that. And then the other thing we did, which is one of the most successful things, is we did a grading for restaurants based on whether or not they had safety equipment and things like that. And that changed neighborhood behavior by about 20 to 50%. So between all those pieces, we've seen the cyclist injuries in my district go from 245 in 2013 before I got elected to 185. So it's down, but it's still flat. And if you go to benkallos.com/bike safety, you'll see that it's still flat, but biking has gone up by about 200%. So I think you need to elect council members with courage. And as a borough president, I will work with your council member to build bike lanes, I hope. And if I have a council member who is against bike lanes, I will work with the community to overrule that council member.
Great. Thank you, guys.
And I sub bench challenge of cycling to work. I have a shorter commute to City Hall, so don't
I
mind.
do it once a year as with a group of folks, and I'll tell you every year it gets easier because of the bike infrastructure.
All right, that's great, guys. Thank you. I think that's going to be it for this evening. I want to just throw out a couple of quick announcements. I want to remind everybody that we do have a 2020 primary coming up at the end of June. We've got a congressional primary down here. We also have an important assembly district primary. I guess we still don't know yet whether the presidential primary is going to be on the ballot, but regardless, we are going to go vote. I encourage everybody to get absentee ballots. I would guess that we are not going to be blessed with a polling place in every lobby this year. I think it's going to be hard to staff those locations. And I think that's fair. I think we should all be voting by absentee this year. So you can go ahead online to nycabsentee.com to request that ballot, which you will still then need to mail back. Also, I'm hoping that we will be helping to organize some phone banking to the neighborhood over the next few Thursdays, both for Carolyn Maloney's campaign and Yuleen New's campaign. Those are both the candidates we've endorsed as a club, and I'll be sending out some information about that and hope you guys will join me for that. We'll try to do this also again in about 3 weeks. I'm not quite sure who we'll invite yet, but I'm going to try to keep this going as a remote meeting place for us until we can all see each other in person. So thanks very much. Thank you, Councilman Kallos. Thank you, Chris Marte.
Everyone.
Be safe, be well, take care.
Yeah.
Thank you. I love your club. You guys are amazing and thoughtful.
Take care. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. See you later.
Thanks, Bill. I appreciate the social distancing that you and Marion are doing right now.
At least we took